respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Alejo, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of my Latino caucus colleagues, I want to first of all thank Assembly Member Joan Sawyer for authoring this resolution honoring African American history and declaring February as Black History Month. Celebrating Black history allows us to reflect on the progress, the richness, and the diversity of African American achievements that allow us to continue our efforts today, expanding social justice to everyone across this great nation. We owe many thanks to individuals that lighted the path for us, from Frederick Douglass to Harriet Tubman to Booker T. Washington to Thurgood Marshall and Fannie Lou Hamer and beyond. But members, I'm also an ethnic studies major, and I was proud that while I was in college, I was able to take classes to learn about the many great communities that make up this great state. I learned about the great music and literary greats such as Duke Ellington, who composed Black, Brown, and Beige. I learned about the powerful lyrics of Miss Billie Holiday, who sang Strange Fruit. And if you don't know what that song is about, you should look it up or also take an ethnic studies class. But today I want to read a poem of one of the leading voices of the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, Langston Hughes. This is a poem, Let America Be America Again, that was written in 1935 for Esquire magazine. And it talks about the plight of all disadvantaged Americans and minorities across this country. Langston Hughes was himself of African American, white, and Native American ancestry. And many don't know that he also went to live in Mexico for a few years in the late in 1919 through 1922, when his father fled this country to flee racism and went to live there and in Cuba for a short time. So with your permission, Mr. Speaker?
Without objection.
Let America be America again. This is only part of it. Let it be that great, strong land of love, where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned by no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air that we breathe. I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man jeering from the land, and I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek, and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be the land where every man is free. The land that's mine, the poor man's, the Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, and whose plow in the rain must bring back our mighty dream again. This poem was written 80 years ago, members, and even though we've come far, we still have a lot of work to do. Members, we must remember that black lives do matter. And again, I want to thank Assemblymember Joan Sawyer and the Black Caucus for bringing this resolution to celebrate the lives of so many great leaders of the African American community.
Thank you, Mr. Alejo. Ms. Eggman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise as the chair of the LGBT caucus in strong support of ACR 6, and I thank Mr. Jones Sawyer for bringing this forward today. Members, driving in today, I was struck by the intersectionality of the LGBT movement as with the African American movement. If it were not for the African American movement and the work, the civil rights work, the work for equality and justice that was laid down, none of us would be able to be standing here today. I went before this to see the National Guard Air Force Base in Stockton, where we just were delivered 10 new Chinook helicopters. And I thought, you know, as an LGBT woman, I would never have been allowed to serve in the military if it were not for the African American folks first fighting for the right to get rid of segregation in the military. And then I thought, members, I was coming up and I heard marriage equality is now legal in Alabama. And I was struck again by the symbolism of we're celebrating African American Black History Month today, and the significance of Selma. And then we hear today that marriage equality is now legal in Alabama. And as I'm thinking about who's going to be my person of the year, I can think of no better person than Wilhelmina Bad to the Bone Henry, who just celebrated her 95th birthday and was the first African American teacher in Stockton and taught for over 50 years as an African American woman. And then myself, having a career as a public educator at a university as an out lesbian. All of these things that I've been able to do would not have been possible if not for the groundwork laid by the African American and black community. So members, I stand before you today and ask for you to please vote for ACR 6.
Thank you, Ms. Eggman. Mr. Hadley, you are recognized at your desk.
Mr. Speaker and members, I also rise in support of Assemblymember Sawyer Jones' resolution, and I also wish to offer a recent experience. I am proud to represent the city of Manhattan Beach. In fact, it is the wonderful town where my family and I have lived for 19 years. However, this has been a bad week for Manhattan Beach and for one of our families. Just this past week, Thursday morning at about 2:15 a.m., somebody placed a gasoline-soaked tire on the front door of the home of Ron and Melissa Clinton and set it on fire. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but damage was extensive. Both the Manhattan Beach Police Department and the Manhattan Beach Fire Department are investigating this incident, and they are calling on other authorities as well. Mr. and Mrs. Clinton and their 2 sons are African American. The arson and the specific use of a gasoline-soaked tire, in addition to the Clintons' race, suggests that this attack was a hate crime. This is obviously a disturbing attack, not just on one family, but on all of us and on our shared values. And while the investigation is still ongoing, I am pleased to report that the community's reaction to this attack has been very heartwarming. Approximately 700 people, including my wife Suzanne and me, participated in a candlelight vigil in downtown Manhattan Beach at 6 p.m. on Friday. Less than 2 days after the attack, a large crowd in a small town turned out to share our love for the Clintons and to show our shared values. This was a truly spontaneous event started by a neighbor of the Clintons and spread via social media and local media. I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Ron Clinton. His son is in high school band with my daughter, Ellen. And I expressed to him, on behalf of the California State Assembly, our support for him and his family. I'm confident I speak for all members of the Assembly here today, as well as for my South Bay community, as I express my support for the Clintons and the values of unity, tolerance, and love. History is not something that happened in the past. It is something that we live every day. And I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the Assemblyman's resolution. Thank you.
Mr. Chavez, you are recognized.
I also like to stand up and speak strongly in support of this. Often when we have these events, I reflect back on my own life and why it's so important to have events like this. As a young lieutenant, when I was in Okinawa, I met a gentleman named Lieutenant General Peterson, the first black man to become a 3-star general. We were in Okinawa, and he had taken the time to sit back to talk to all officers about what it was like to be in the Corps, what his experience was. He was one of the first fighter pilots to raise to that rank in the Marine Corps. It was just a few months ago that Lieutenant General Ron Coleman, he also was one of the 3 black 3-star generals in the Marine Corps. Why Ron Coleman was an inspiration to me, he was a young officer. I actually sat on the promotion board for him. And now he's a 3-star general in the Marine Corps. Walt Gaskin, a major general, good friend of mine. We served in Japan and we served in Lejeune. He did a number of tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. An infantry officer, a true warrior, an honorable man. And Major General Clifford Stanley, another one who I knew in the Corps. I say that because my experience has shown that the Corps could only be good when it recognized the value of all Marines. I say that's the same here for our society in California. We can only reach our full potential when we recognize the value of all people. It's wonderful that we're having this. Strongly supported. I'm sure it'll go unanimously through. But I thought I'd share that story with you, that 3 Marine officers, generals. You know, what does a general mean? Well, there's probably about 190,000 Marines at any one time serving. There's only about 30 generals, and as far as lieutenant generals, there's probably only 4 or 5. These are people that have reached a very high level of responsibility, and they're all black men. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chavez. Dr. Weber, you are recognized at your desk.
Yes. Mr. Speaker and members, I too rise as a member of the caucus and as a member of this body, but also as a professor who spent the last 44 years fighting for black studies, for history, and the teaching of all ethnic groups, not only at the university, but the K-12 system and across the nation. And I do that, and I rise today once again, as I always do, to try to remind us what history really is. We sometimes have a list of heroes and heroines, and those are very important. But it's also important to recognize what the absence of black history means. Because when history is not present in one's life, when you don't know who you are, you don't know where you've been, you have very difficult mapping where the future is going to take you. And so as a nation, we spend years and years teaching history, not because our children can't comprehend it, but because we know that in the process of teaching that history, we are creating the American character. We're teaching our children to value America. We're teaching our children to value themselves, but we're also teaching them their potential for greatness, that they are made of great material. And so when you don't have women in your history, when you don't have African Americans in your history, when you don't have Latinos in your history, you're also teaching them that there is no greatness in them. But you're also teaching their friends, who also become the police and the others in the nation, to also not value those individuals too. And so it's not just about that in terms of this is Black History Month, but this is trying to rewrite what we ought to be about in terms of our children. You know, Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of the Press said that when you capture a nation, the first thing you do is you burn their libraries. And I used to wonder why, as a kid, I'd read about the burning of the libraries of Alexandria and places like that. And I didn't understand at the time. But then as I got older and I began to study, I realized that what they were attempting to do was to burn the memory, the greatness of a people that is still now trying to reconstruct their world in terms of their contribution to civilization. And that's what's happening today. We're trying to reconstruct the greatness of our people. You know, recently I studied the history of my father. And I'd always thought that my father came to California looking for a great life for his children. I didn't know that my father came to California because they were going to kill him in Hope, Arkansas, because he refused to bow down. He refused to give his crops up to some white man. He refused to take less for what he was owed. And he never said, yes, sir, no, sir. And therefore, they were looking to kill him. And they had to sneak him out of Hope, Arkansas in the dead of night to come to California. And then eventually they had to sneak our family, the 6 children and my mother, to California 3 months later. That's the history of my family, but it made me very proud when I learned that, because I knew that my father never bowed down despite the limited education he had. And he went back to Hope, Arkansas every 4 years to face the people who wanted to kill him. It made me very proud to know that's why I stand so strong, because he put that in me. But it's important for us to know our history, for our children to understand it, and because it creates in them the ability and the power to do anything. So when we look at our educational system, we look at our judicial system, and what I found consistently in working with young people is they have no knowledge of self. And what we are constantly trying to do is to recreate that in our young people. And that will become critical for us in this floor to talk about how we educate children, what resources we put into it, and how we create a history of California, a history of this nation, and a history of the world that really reflects the greatness of all of those who have contributed. I challenge each one of us on this floor today, because we are making history in this body. And someday someone will say, what did those folks do? Well, that was the most diverse legislature in the history of California in 2015. What did they do that was so unique, that set a different course for California? That will be the question that will be asked by the children who look at us to inspire them to become great legislators. I also say to my colleagues, the 12 of us, the largest group of African Americans in the Black Caucus in the history of California, what will this divine 12 do that's going to set a tone and a direction for leadership in the African American community that no other body has done before? We have a tremendous challenge. We can come here and be inspired by the walls and the beauty of the floors. But Frederick Douglass, when he was faced with the same challenge with the 4th of July address, and he had the opportunity to forget where he came from, he declared before everyone there, he says, "If I forget thee, O Jerusalem," he said, "then may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth." I challenge the 12 of us to think likewise, that we have a unique opportunity and a unique responsibility. So history is important, but it's just not the collection of facts and numbers and figures, because we can find that on any computer. It is really the development of character, the development of the people of California, and giving life, purpose, and direction to African American children and others. I ask for your support for ACR 6.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. I will ask Mr. McCarty to close on ACR 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to close on this item. Black History Month is a special time for our state, our nation, to recognize the many accomplishments of African Americans and to reflect upon the African American experience. In reality, we should celebrate this rich history every month, but February is nonetheless a special time for a special focus. For me, it's about reflecting on the past, the present, and the future. This month is a time to recognize extraordinary black leaders of yesterday and today. Our kids in school will learn about African Americans who changed history, like Harriet Tubman, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and President Barack Obama. Most importantly, this month is a celebration of the millions of everyday African Americans who have led extraordinary lives. As some of you may know, I'm the proud product of a biracial family. Today, I have the opportunity to honor and remember two everyday African Americans, my paternal grandparents, Kate and Leon McCarty, who are unfortunately long gone. Early in the last century, like many African Americans, they fled the racist oppression of the Deep South to find better lives. They both headed west, met and married in Arizona, and later relocated to Los Angeles so their kids could escape second-class segregated schools. As with every American, they wanted their kids to be able to make the most of themselves through education, regardless of their race. Their passion and belief in justice for all continues to inspire me and all of us here today. While we've undoubtedly come a long way, this quest continues. Last year, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This August, we'll celebrate the 50th anniversary of the historic Voting Rights Act. However, as we remember these crowning achievements and honor Black History Month, we know that so much more work is needed to be done. I'm confident that California will continue to lead the way. On behalf of Assemblymember Joan Sawyer, I have a few asks. The first is to remind everybody that after the adjournment, we'll have a reception honoring 12 extraordinary Californians in the Willie L. Brown Conference Room. And then secondly, I again ask to close on this item and ask for your aye vote for ACR 6 and ask Mr. Speaker to open up the first roll for co-authors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCarty. All debate and discussion having ceased, we'll move to a vote on ACR 6. The first roll call, as requested, will be open for co-authors on ACR 6. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. This is for co-authors, members, co-authors on ACR 6. 75 co-authors are added. Without objection, we may take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. For this observance, we will recognize a number of distinguished honorees. I am appointing a select committee on escort to bring our special guests onto the floor for a special presentation. Members, retire to the rear of the chamber as I call your name. Assembly members Burke, Brown, Cooper, Gibson, Holden, Joan Sawyer, McCarty, Ridley Thomas, Thurmond, and Weber, as well as our special guests, Senators Hall and Mitchell. I ask Assembly Speaker Tony Atkins, the chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus, Assembly Member Joan Sawyer, and Republican Leader Olson, as well as special guest Senators Isidore Hall, the vice chair of the Black Caucus, to move to the center aisle to receive our honorees.